Well, hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Secrets to Real Estate Investing. We have a wonderful guest here today who's really experienced. I really admire the success he's had in his transition from corporate America into being a full-time real estate investor and seeing the freedom that that affords him. I have a good time masterminding with him at a networking lunch that we go to monthly in Huntington Beach, which I highly recommend that you get together with fellow peers and mastermind with them, bounce ideas off each other, talk about the market, what you see, what's working, what's not. It's really helpful as you are an entrepreneur out on your own to be, talking to other people and learning about what's working. Anyway, with that, I'd love to welcome Chris Weiler to the show. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, Holly, how you doing?
Great. Hey, why don't you start by giving our audience a little background on your backstory and what you did before real estate investing and how you landed into what you're doing today.
Wow. Gosh, such an open question, but I'm happy to answer it. I was in corporate America for about 15 years. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I absolutely loved it. It was great, but and I made very decent money, but it was just never 100% fulfilling because I just always had this bug of wanting to be an entrepreneur, doing something myself, but just really had no idea, how that would work and what that would entail. And, I bought my first house in Irvine I'm going to date myself here a little bit, in 1998. That was, bought it for myself, primary residence, thinking I was completely getting ripped off. Buying a 3-bedroom house for $247,000.
Whoa!
And a number of years later, when we wanted to move, I ended up selling the house for 3 times more than what I put into it. And I started thinking, there's a lot of potential here in the real estate industry. And I kind of put that on the back burner for a little bit. And when I got my MBA, and a little bit after that, I came across, believe it or not, a seminar that I went to, learned a little more about real estate, and probably more than anything else, it really gave me an opportunity to look around the room and say, what is it that I have that maybe I could contribute that's different from others? And, for me, it was a couple of things. One, it was good access to capital. And also that when I put my mind to something, I don't let it go. And, I went to one of the people teaching the class and I talked to them about possibly financing one of their deals. And they were like, we already have somebody and they're really great. We have a great relationship with them. But it happened to be a couple weeks later that their financing fell through. They came to me and wanted me to finance a project within basically less than a week. And fortunately, it was a very local project, so I was able to look at the numbers, do a ton of due diligence, and it ended up working out. Worked out really well. We've developed some trust, and that's really how I started in the industry. Is that they just kept on giving me more and more leads. I ended up doing quite a few deals with them, and then I started networking with people and meeting them, and just started branching out, and that's how I got into it.
So you started out then as a private money lender. That was your first experience, right?
Yes.
Right. So many people start down the real estate investing path by being a wholesaler. So I like that yours is a little different. A lot of people start with no money, and so that's why they wholesale, is to grow a pool of money. But you had some money from an unintentional real estate deal, I guess, where you had a bunch of cash, and then you're like, okay, how can I invest this? But
sure.
It was more.
I'm sorry, I mean to cut you there, Holly, but to also remember too that the people on the other side of my deal had no money invested in the deal. So they weren't wholesalers. They were, basically buying the properties and reselling them right away as well. So yeah, I guess they were kind of like wholesalers, but it was transactional funding. It was something that's not done as much anymore now. But yeah, you're right. That was my shtick. That was what I was good at, and that was what they were good at. And fortunately, we made a good mesh together.
Okay, so that's how you started, but I know you've evolved and you're not just a transactional lender anymore. So give us the rest of the story. Where did you go next? What did you do next?
Sure. Well, just to dive a little bit deeper into that, it wasn't all of a sudden I woke up one day and said, hey, I want to be a transactional funder. Obviously there had to be a lot of research on my part to kind of look into, what kind of forms would I need? Is this something that I really want to do? And for me, I ended up reaching out to a lot of different people. There's a website, I'm sure plenty of your followers know about it, called Bigger Pockets. Did a lot of research on that and called up and contacted a whole bunch of different transactional funders to see if this is something that I want to do. Well, most of them wouldn't give me the time of day. Some that did were, let's just say, maybe a little condescending, but there was one guy in particular who was really great and kind of put me under his wing and helped me out a lot. We ended up doing deals together and such. So that was really helpful for me when I first began. Now, I think what really happened is that was a finite period of time when that was really popular. And when the banks kind of caught on and they put on some deed restrictions, transactional funding kind of evolved. And it became more fix and flip funding. So more of a longer term kind of funding. And whereas I saw the tea leaves and I evolved into that, I saw a number of other transactional funders who didn't, who kind of stuck with the business and stuck with it. And where they made really good money before, they were making less and less and less. So for me, kind of the lesson learned there is that you really, as an entrepreneur, have to be flexible. You have to read the tea leaves, see what's in the distance, and not hold on to only what you're doing, especially if you feel like it might not be around forever. So that evolved more into fix and flip funding. It also, because I was doing this transactional funding all over the country, it introduced me to a number of different people. And I saw this one guy in Ohio, and he was buying properties 10 at a time from this holding company, and reselling, basically being a good wholesaler and reselling them to investors. And he was leaving a lot of meat on the bone. I'm like, wow, this is a really good wholesaler. And I did a couple deals with them. One of them, to be quite honest with you, didn't go as well. But the benefit of that was I saw how professional he was. I saw how, it didn't go well in the beginning, but he ended up salvaging the deal. And it really showed me how well he knew how to do things within Ohio politics and how to get things done. And I ended up going to him and said, hey, instead of wholesaling these deals off, why don't we see if we can go to your source, get a whole bunch of properties, and just cash flow between the two of us, create a company and cash flow between the two of us. And, it took a little back and forth, but he agreed. And because of that, I now have a landlording business as well. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. I love it. So how many homes do you have? And now, are you just in Ohio with that partner? How many homes do you have there in Ohio?
With that partner, we were over 100 properties at one point.
Wow.
But yeah, we've since then, and that's a story within itself. I sold some of those properties off to a hedge fund, got all my initial capital back, and we're right around 70 right now and still building.
Wow, fantastic. And you still like that market, I assume, since you're still building?
I really love that market. I will tell you, any market like that, if you're talking about, we tend to classify them, as you know, as A, B, C, kind of properties. And I would give our properties anywhere from a strong C to a B minus. And anytime you're in a C area, it's really exceptionally important that you have either property management that you really trust, or kind of create your own property management on the site, because you'll find a lot of properties, the maintenance cost tends to be to advertise. And we're looking at over 20-25% of your incoming rent could be going toward just maintaining your property.
Wow, that's a really high expense ratio. I don't experience that.
Yeah,
but I'm probably higher than that C class of property.
Well, yeah, you got to realize a lot of these properties are 50+ years old. They're fully depreciated,
Yeah.
So they, require a lot of time and effort to keep them up. So it's important, very often people are very interested when they see, oh, I can get these properties for $25,000, $35,000 and look at this potential cash flow. But it's really important that people look into really what are the exact costs to keep up that property and what is realistic. And I think that it can be great, but it can also be very expensive if you're not sure of what you're doing. And if you're only buying 1 or 2 properties, And let's say that's all the money somebody has, it can be really
Oh.
a problem if one of those properties you have to, I don't know, you lose a tenant. The tenants don't tend to be quite as
Stable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a great market if you've got great systems and a good team in place. And I would say if you can have a number of properties, so your risk is spread out over a number of properties.
Okay, well, that is super interesting how that evolved. Now, I think you're also doing, or you have been recently doing some fix and flips in California still, where we both live, for those of us that don't know. Yeah, Chris is in Southern California. So tell us about that and any other places that you're working. Like, I think you're still doing Florida too, correct?
Sure. Yeah, I've got a few different hubs. One of them is over here in Southern California. I like the South Riverside area, so your Temecula, your Murrieta area. If I'm being totally frank, it was really hot for me a few years ago when short sales and foreclosures were really high. You could buy properties at a significant discount, and it didn't take very much. A lot of these properties you could buy at a big discount and put very, carpet and paint them, maybe a little bit of upgrade of a kitchen, and you could resell it and make a great profit. I'm still able to do that, but just not quite the volume that I had done in the past. And what I'm finding too is most of the deals that I get are, instead of just a carpet and paint and a small rehab, we're talking much larger rehabs, knocking down walls, completely revamping the whole house. So your deals can be good, but it requires a bit more of a experienced investor, with all those connections to know, how to really make that work. I would say what a lot of people have got to be very careful of, especially when they're new, if you don't have those connections with those subcontractors, you know this too, Holly, if you've got a big project, you've got two, things going on, and if your plumber, for instance, is backed out, and all of a sudden you can't do, anything else, you can't put the woodwork or paint or anything else until one project is done, your whole project can really start going out into the distance, and that's going to be the absolute killer. So we, as you know, as fix and flippers, who want things to be as quick as possible for holding cost purposes and just, for return in general. Your return is much better if you can get done quicker. So.
Yep, time is money. Yeah, I mean, your return goes way up if you do one deal a year versus 2 deals a year. I mean, or 4 deals a year, it just increases your returns exponentially.
Sure. So to expand on that, so yeah, I do have a couple that are going on in South Riverside right now. Both of them are in Temecula. Both of them are pretty high rehabs that are taking a little longer to do, which is fine. But I'm looking forward to those. I'm testing out a new market that isn't going so hot, to be honest with you, up in Oregon. And I haven't quite decided if I'm going to continue. I have 2 projects going on over there, and one of them is about to close. Cross our fingers here. We'll see, but that fell out of escrow a couple of times, and it's you always got to, like I said, you always got to be flexible, try new markets. This one has been particularly difficult to find good subcontractors, and because of that, the project, it got really extended out, and I'm also finding really finicky buyers, up there too. So it's not my favorite market right now. If I had to pick one market, specifically for fix and flips, that's my favorite right now, it would be Florida. Florida is a judicial state, so there's a lot of those foreclosures, a lot of those short sales that are still kind of going on over there. They're backlogged much more so than were in California. So I'm still getting a lot of really good deals out in Florida, and I've got a great team out there, people that I really trust, and we're doing anywhere from 10 to 15 fix and flips at a time out there in Florida.
Wow, that's huge. That's a huge volume. How often do you yourself go back to Florida?
Honestly, not as much as I should. I should be going out there more often, but it's just so easy these days. With the internet and all the due diligence and everything I can do over the internet to make sure everything is going on well. And to be quite honest, I've been working with these same people for years, so that trust is really developed. My biggest fear is, to be quite honest, is that I hope I'm not just relying too much on that. I'm a big believer in face-to-face interactions, really, build that relationship. And I need to put myself in front of them a little more often to make sure that that relationship is maintained. So I think I'll have to be going back out there sometime soon.
So do you go a couple times a year?
Yeah, one or two times a year. Yeah.
It's a long flight. I mean, I've done that flight to Florida. I wouldn't be wanting to do it all the time either. I don't blame you. That's great. I mean, the fact that you've built such great relationships and you've got trustworthy team members, I mean, that's fantastic. And obviously you've treated them well, which I think is a huge key factor in getting people excited to work with you long term. You got to treat people well and then they'll want to work with you. So you're obviously very good at that.
I'll take it one step further, Holly. I would say that a lot of my success and a lot of the reason I'm able to get new business is when other people screw up. When other people, that's how I got my guys in Florida. That's how I got my first deal. My first deal, as I was saying earlier, is because somebody had funding and they fell out last minute. I have never ever not funded a deal after committing to it, ever, and I never will. And the reason why is because I want to maintain that relationship. It's horrible as an investor if you come across this amazing deal, you got everything set up, you're expecting your funding to come through, and then it doesn't come through. It's horrible. So whether you're a funder or really any aspect of real estate, or gosh, any aspect of working with people at all, really be trustworthy and stick to what you say and do what you're going to say. People like predictability. And I'm not the least expensive person out there for funding. I'm just not. But what I do provide is I'm very predictable. And the guys know that the funding will always be there. So be predictable and you will succeed tremendously over others. That's a huge, huge factor in my book.
Amen, brother. I mean, I found that even with realtors. I bought my first 100 houses at auction, the next 100 houses. I bought mostly through realtors. I think maybe 5 wholesale deals and all the rest with through realtors. And I remember them being many times surprised when I would go to them and say, I'll buy the deal with you and then I'll resell it with you. And they'd be surprised when I would come back to resell. I'm like, well, that's what I said. And I keep forgetting that not everybody acts in integrity and is a man or woman of their word just because that's how I operate. And then of course, I'm always shocked and mortified when someone doesn't do what they say they're going to do. And my husband's always saying I'm too trustworthy, not trustworthy. You can't ever be too trustworthy, but yeah, you definitely.
You know what? You can never be too, here's the way I look at it. If somebody does go back on their word, sometimes it can be a blessing, especially if it's in the beginning of the relationship or you haven't invested a lot of money, because it now lets you know the character of that person and if you should ever move forward with them. It's rare when you've developed a relationship with somebody and they've been very trustworthy all along and all of a sudden they do something wrong. So as long as it's the beginning, sometimes I find it's a blessing. Hey, thank you for letting me know you're not somebody I ever want to work with again.
Yes, I love it. And for those that can't see Chris, he's got a big smile on his face. Thank you very much. And you're on your way. Well, why don't you tell us about either an interesting deal or a very lucrative deal where it was a home run. Give people some inspiration here, what they might be able to hope to accomplish.
Sure. Well, how about I expand on that one deal that I told you about in Ohio?
Okay.
I haven't talked a lot about that one. If you remember, it was the guy who was the wholesaler. He was doing 10 at a time to investors, and we came to an agreement that we would buy a whole bunch ourselves. We went to it's a holding company, and it bought all the assets of this defunct hedge fund. And they really were only interested in commercial properties. They were really only interested in multifamily, but they were located in Florida, and they had all these single family and all these duplexes, and they were based in Ohio. A lot of them were underwater, or they didn't have tenants in them, or they needed to be fixed up, and they're paying property taxes on these hundreds of properties, sitting there in Ohio. And we knew they were a distressed seller. Distressed from the standpoint that they just didn't really care. They made all their money back from all those, multifamily and commercial stuff. They weren't terribly interested in this other stuff, and they weren't going to dump more money into fixing up the properties because they had no really good local representation. So My partner and I came at them with an offer to buy 100 properties, and their initial response, I guess the G-rated version, was to tell us to go away.
Okay.
And, you can't be afraid as an investor to put in an offer and feel that you're going to hurt somebody's feelings. You can't be afraid to do that. You put out a whole bunch of, if you put in an offer and they accept it right away, at least me as an investor, sometimes I start thinking maybe I offer too much. So they told me that's too little, and it was probably, they really wanted to kind of feel the market. So they did. And unfortunately, they had some offers, and it was other wholesalers. They didn't know that. They thought it was people who had money, and when it came to selling, they couldn't sell it. So they couldn't wholesale it out. And they kept on getting these other people that would come through an escrow, and they just couldn't find an end buyer. So they came back to us, and they said, "Hey, Chris, are you still willing to purchase these properties?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course." But the price has now gone down. I mean, they're the ones that contacted me. So now the price is even lower. Time is money, right? Didn't we talk about that earlier? So, there was some back and forth, but we finally came to an agreement. We got an amazing deal on 100 properties in Ohio for pennies on the dollar. To be totally, frank, we went to escrow. 20 of the properties, the title issues were so bad that we decided to only go forward on 80 of them. And when I say bad, it's like 30 grand is owed to John Smith, and John Smith can't be found. I mean,
oh yeah.
Am I going to buy a property for less than 30 grand with a 30 grand, lien on it that, title won't put any insurance on? The truth is now, because we got such a great deal, I wish we did. I wish I had rolled the dice on those 20 bad ones. But look, in the end, I got 80 properties. So my first foray into being a landlord was buying 80 properties at once.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Learning before that. But what I did know is I had a really good team on the ground. And we had those 80 properties. Half of them were already rented out. They were already with a property management company. What we decided to do was keep the half that were rented out with that property management company. We fully rehabbed the other half of properties that didn't have tenants in them. And then as they came online, we created our own property management company. And then once all those houses were rehabbed and we had our own property management company, then we brought on those properties from that other property management company back into ours. So currently it's all under our own property management company, which if you're going to have a number of properties out of state, and we're talking about that B- and lower class of property, I highly recommend doing your own. And the reason why is that it's very rare that property management company and your needs are kind of intertwined. I mean, they love it when there's maintenance. They usually get some kind of kickback, which they're guys that are doing the maintenance. So I sleep better at night knowing that it's my property management company. So we had that great deal. I put a good chunk of change into buying it. I put a good chunk of change, into fixing up the properties. And, I had just every intention of cash flowing these for the rest of my life and just doing a great cash flow on these properties. But I had a hedge fund came along and offered me good money for these properties. And I ended up selling them a third of the properties and got, a big chunk of my money back. So now the majority of these properties are all free and clear and, making good money.
How do you allocate, if you're willing to share, because I know you have a partner back there, how do you structure who gets what? How much money?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the best way to start this is saying everything is negotiable. And just because I did it my way doesn't mean it's right or doesn't mean it's the best. It worked out for both of us. And the way it worked out is that we would eventually get him toward a 50% ownership in the company. And he's there now, just so that everybody else knows. But it didn't start that way. It started out with him on a salary and with 10% of the business. And then once we got up to 90% tenant occupancy, he got an additional 10%. And then if everything moved along smoothly, he would get 10% a year until, with certain other parameters, until he got to 50. Now, one way he could accelerate getting to the 50 is if all my initial capital got paid back. And that's what ended up happening. All the initial capital got paid back because of that buyout from that hedge fund. So we are currently 50-50 partners in that deal, of which, remind you, I have no current money invested in. So it's what I guess some would call an infant return. I've got no money invested in anymore, and the vast majority of the heavy lifting is done by my partners in our system, down there.
And that partner, I assume, works full time in this business, right?
I would say he's an entrepreneur like myself.
Oh, okay.
So I would say the vast majority of his time, yes. This is his primary concern, and he does that. But he's also, he still does a couple of things on the side, and sometimes I even fund that. Sometimes we have fix and flips down there, and I fund them, and those are outside of our current business.
Okay.
The realtor, sometimes he'll sell a property, and it's not part of our business. So
right.
I'm okay with that, and that was also something that we're always very upfront with each other. We've developed this relationship over time, and it's been very fruitful for both of us. And if there's anything that was ever like, what do you think? He would bring it up to my attention first. So it's worked out well.
Sweet. Well, what a fantastic story. I love that you found a great team member and you made a really great win-win situation and opportunity. Let him buy in, earn his way into the ownership. I mean, that's really great. Thank you for sharing that whole structure. That's really interesting.
Sure.
Well,
sure.
Before we wrap up, tell us a story, if you would, share a successful flip story. Since so many of our listeners want to flip houses, it could be in Florida, California, wherever. Tell us like a winner, an inspiration one.
Okay. My problem right now is I'm trying to think in my head because there are a lot of them, and I get so excited about talking about them, and some of them are good stories. And you know what? I think one of the best things about fix and flips is that you can often get these properties that just look absolutely horrible, just horrible. And when you redo them up, it's so great seeing those before and after pictures. And I remember this one property where we fixed it up and the prior owner came in and it's like, this is my house. This was my house. And just couldn't fathom it. But I think a good one. This one was in Menifee, of all places, and it was a property that was a newer property. It was at the time about I think it was only about 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
But the property had basically went to short sale, and the people that were living in it, how best to put this? They had 5 Great Danes living in the house.
Oh my gosh.
Living in the house.
That had to smell good.
Oh, it was, the stairs and the upstairs were all carpeted. That all had to be ripped out because there was just pee, all throughout the carpet. All the woodwork along the stairs was chewed up, so we had to get some craftsmen to fix that. Downstairs, and I don't see this a lot, but some of these higher-end houses, you have these beautiful concrete, dyed concrete flooring with, inlaid tiles, very intricate, and it's really beautiful when it's maintained. But these dogs and their nails, they like all the major pathways that dug through that beautiful red hue down to like the gray concrete color. So the house didn't look great, and the landscaping was completely shot. They had a great looking pool with solar heating. The solar heating needed to be fixed a little bit too, and they had ploppers in the pool, and they had this panoramic view. And I'm trying to remember the numbers on the house, but I ended up purchasing it for just over 300, I believe, 300,000, and we ended up putting about 50 into it, and we ended up selling it for $500,000. So we
awesome.
We made after all expenses and everything, we made about $100,000 on it. And probably one of the best parts about it, though, was the family who bought it was an Orange County family whose father had to move to Menifee, and they lived in a nice house, and they liked living in Orange County, and they had a son and a daughter that were very unhappy with the fact that they not only had to move, but they go in an empire. And they ended up getting this house, and they were so happy with this house because it was a nicer house than they had. I mean, this house would be well over $1 million in anywhere in Orange County. They had a gorgeous view of the mountains. They had this beautiful pool with a swim up to bar and palapas, like I said, in the pool. And
Awesome.
it was just a real upgrade for them for their house. So it just made them really, really happy. And it was really good to see that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that you take satisfaction and fulfillment and pride in making other people happy. I mean, that's a big part of what we do as investors, which I think some people have kind of a negative impression of fix and flip investors, that we're these sharks going, but that is so not the case. Yeah, I mean, we take eyesore houses, problem houses, turn them into beautiful places for new families to move in and make their new memories and just be so happy. So I'm glad you like that part of the business too.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, just in final wrap up here, what advice would you give to a new beginning fix and flip investor? Like, what's some of your best advice?
Okay. I think to wrap up, some of the best advice, just to reiterate what I said earlier about integrity and sticking to what you say you're going to do. As soon as you're predictable, other people around you are going to appreciate that, and they're going to want to work with you, invest with you, do what you want. Realize that although my route was through good access to capital and providing capital for other people to do it, remember that all those people that I provided capital to, especially fix and flippers, don't put any money into it, or very limited amount of money into it. So you could be on the other side of the equation. And if you're predictable and you've got a good deal, you're going to get people like me to want to invest in it. So it's to be upfront and be honest with people, show integrity, and what else? Yeah, is to really figure out what you want to do and really stick with it and really push for it. There's a lot of people that say they want to do something and they never follow through on it. Don't be afraid to make that jump and to do it. Make a decision and to stick with it. I read an interesting thing a few weeks ago that said that people who are successful make their decisions quickly, and they change their mind. It takes them time to change their mind. And a lot of unsuccessful people change their mind very quickly and take forever to make a decision. So make an educated guess, jump into it, learn from your experiences, and come out here into the entrepreneur pool and have a good time.
I love it. Thank you. And I love that advice. I've heard that too. That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your experience and giving up of your time to share with others today. We really appreciate it. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that? Are you on Facebook or LinkedIn or Bigger Pockets, or where's the best way for someone to find you?
Those are all great sources. Probably Bigger Pockets or LinkedIn are both good choices. Get in touch with me. I highly recommend anybody involved in real estate, whether you're a beginner or very experienced, to get on a Bigger Pockets. I've got nothing to gain by saying that, but there's just a lot of people on there, and there's a lot of great information you can get from that site.
Yep, and go ahead and spell your name out for people if they want to find you too.
Sure. It's Chris Weiler, C-H-R-I-S. Last name is W-E-I-L-E-R.
Fantastic. And we'll have links to that on our show notes. So with that, go out there and take some action.
Good talk.
Hey there, thanks for watching the video. Make sure you like it and click subscribe to get notified of more videos. And you can go to hardhatholly.com for a free download on secrets to finding great deals.